There's none. House Bill 786 is left pending. The chair lays out House Bill 103 and recognizes Chairman Landgraf to explain his bill. He has a committee substitute. Chair White offers up committee substitute to House Bill 103.
Thank you, Chairman White and Vice Chair Bowers and members of the committee. I do have a committee substitute, Mr. Chairman, as you mentioned, to lay out for House Bill 103, which would establish a Texas active shooter alert system. Now, before I detail the changes in the committee substitute, I do want to share with you and our colleagues the genesis of this proposal. On Labor Day weekend in 2019, just a few months after we were last in session, my hometown and our neighbor community to the East Midland were tragically added to a long list of communities that have been tormented by a mass shooting. It's something that still defines our community, both in a negative way, but also in a very meaningful and a very positive way. And that's one reason why I'm here today with this particular bill. You know, when mass shootings occur, I think because of the line of work that we're all in, we understand how the aftermath of those things normally work. When it comes to policymaking and policy proposals, one side normally retreats to its corner and the other retreats to its corner. And we've seen that happen time after time. What I'm really proud about when it came to the people of Odessa in the aftermath, I can't tell you how many text messages, Facebook messages, phone calls I got before the sun set that night on August 31st, 2019, with people who were solution-oriented, and because of the nature of this particular attack. And just to remind you, it was a mobile rampage that lasted for more than an hour. It crossed county lines, city limits, and in its wake, we lost 7 precious souls. And 25 others were injured, and you're going to meet some of the survivors of that attack, and you're going to meet the mother of the youngest victim of that attack in just a few minutes. It was as horrific as anything that our community has experienced, and it was, without question, our darkest day. But in those texts and in those messages that I was getting from constituents, in those phone calls, the solutions that were offered, again, before the sun set that night, were how come we don't have an active shooter alert system, something like an Amber Alert, so that way when there's a mass shooting that's going on for more than a few minutes in different locations, there's a way that the public can be made aware and that the public can be alerted so that they can take whatever action they need to protect themselves and their families. And I didn't have an answer. But I said, but that sounds like a hell of a good idea for a bill in the next session of the Texas legislature. That took on greater gusto for me when Joanna Leyva, who, again, you're going to meet, also wanted something like this to happen. And I'm going to let her tell her story, and I don't want to tell it because I can't begin to share with you from her perspective what this means. But I've been honored and privileged to be able to work with her on this. And I want to thank her for her courage to stand up and tell her story, because in her grief, it wasn't easy to do that, and it took several months for her to have the courage to do that. But I'm very proud of her for doing it, and I know that her daughter, Layla Hernandez, who is 15 years old, is looking down on her with great pride for what she's here to do today. Now, that said, let me take care of a little bit of business. The committee substitute, Mr. Chairman, simply clarifies that the Federal Wireless Emergency Alert System will be utilized under this bill to issue alerts. And that's the same system, just for your information, that we use for Amber Alerts and Silver Alerts. So it piggybacks off of the existing platform. Also, the committee substitute spells out that TxDOT will not be required to operate the dynamic messaging signs in a way that violates federal law or impairs their ability to draw down federal transportation dollars. I want to thank DPS and TxDOT for working on with us on that to make those clarifications, because we certainly don't want to do any harm in trying to do something so good. With that being said, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions about the bill or the committee substitute. And if there are none, I will reserve my right to close.
Okay, just quick question. We don't have a fiscal note on the sub yet, do we?
We do have one on the bill, but not on the sub.
Not on the sub. Okay. Thank you for bringing this bill to us. I'm gonna get you in a little bit. We have been given a witness order by the bill author. So if you're looking at your pad and we seem like we're not skipping over anyone. He's given us an order, a precedent of witnesses. The chair recognizes Representative Tenderholt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very, very brief and more of a statement. As I look at this, I think it's a great idea. I just want to consider the radius, and the reason I say that is in a large metropolitan area like Dallas. I was talking with my staff. If something happens in Richardson, people in Arlington might be 42 miles away. And I don't know that we want to freak out the entire metroplex. So I just want you to think about that rural versus, the metroplexes. Just think about it, because I don't know what the right answer is either. But I don't know if the radius changes and then as it rolls into another area that they do another alert. I don't know what the answer is, but I wanted to bring that up to you because you don't live where I live. It's a great idea, but in Arlington, if something's happening way up in Richardson, it may not affect us at that way. And I don't know that I want people just totally freaked out. So just think about that, please.
Representative Tenderholt, appreciate that. I admit my rural bias is showing in that 50-mile radius. Thank you also for so. I hear what you're saying. I think that's an adjustment that we can make. So maybe we could make it. And by the way, one reason, I guess two reasons why I wanted to include that 50-mile radius provision is I don't want the public to, really two things. I don't want the public to get unnecessarily alerted or unnecessarily anxious about something that's happening on the other side of the state. And also, I think we may all know something about this. I also don't want there to be fatigue about alerts that you may get to where you just kind of ignore them or it doesn't mean anything. When you get an alert like this on your phone, we want it to mean something because that's how it can have its intended benefit. But so to your point, one reason 50 miles wasn't even really it wasn't arbitrary. It was more about how far can you travel in an hour, and so maybe we should look at the temporal aspect of that rather than a distance aspect. But I appreciate that suggestion. I think maybe we can make it even better by taking that into consideration. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Harless.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir. Thank you for bringing this bill. I think it's a great bill. Why is the physical note so high on it? Because this is already in place, isn't it?
It is. So we're working some of that out, and as the chairman indicated, that is for the other bill. We've made some adjustments with TxDOT and DPS that I think is probably going to reduce that, but I don't want to say that without actually getting those figures. But by piggybacking on an existing system, I think that's gonna improve that quite a bit.
Okay, thank you. I was just shocking why it was so high because we already have it.
Sure.
And to Representative Tenderholt's the issue he brought up, let's make sure in that discussion we bring in the DPS people, because they have these algorithms and they've got some other tools that they're using on these issues, and make sure we're making a very, very good decision, okay? Because they got a good crew over there that has a lot of background on this type of action. I'm going to go ahead and recognize Representative Morales.
How you doing, Representative? Last week, we were provided with certain handouts related to wireless emergency alert talking point, and I'm wondering if that's the same system that would be used, because it seems that it's already being offered and would be at no cost, and I'm just wondering if you and your staff took a look at it because of the fiscal note concerns that were raised also. And I don't think this is great. I think it should happen. I'm just wondering if incorrectly they're assessing something that you shouldn't be tied to as far as the fiscal note.
Well, so great question, Representative Morales. So the answer is yes, we have looked at that, and the committee substitute that has been offered I believe, addresses that by clarifying that this alert system would use the federal wireless emergency alert system, which, of course, we already utilize for Amber Alerts and Silver Alerts in the state. So, again, I think it is going to address that issue very well.
Great. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anyone else before we cut him loose and start the witnesses? Okay. Members, are there any questions for Chairman Landgraf? And you do reserve your right to close.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. The chair calls Father Tim Hayter. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, Father. And we're going to thank you, Father, for in advance for stating your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill for the record.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name's Father Timothy Hyder. I try to be a hider and not a hater. It doesn't.
I got you. I got you.
Doesn't go good.
No, you're Hyder, not hater. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm sorry about that.
Again, thank you for having me, and I am representing myself, but also with the approval of Bishop Michael Siss, our bishop for the Diocese of San Angelo. Midland, Odessa is in that diocese, and also the Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops also supports this bill. And
you are testifying.
I'm testifying on behalf of myself,
bill?
but yes, in favor of the bill.
In favor of the bill. Okay.
With their support.
Okay.
So, I am currently in Midland at St. Anne's Catholic Church. At the time of the shooting in Odessa, August 31st, 2019, I was at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. St. Elizabeth Ann Seton is kind of the northeastern part of Odessa where the majority of the shooting took place. Okay, in fact, a block from the church where I was is where Cameron Brown, 30 years old, was shot and killed. And there was another intersection. I went through that intersection right afterwards, and I went through another intersection on Faudree and the Loop, 191, that Joe Griffith was shot and killed at. I went through both of those intersections, not even knowing that this is minutes afterwards, not even knowing that the shooter had been in that area. I had the information that I received was the only information I could get on my phone was information put out by news agencies who were doing the very best they could to inform the people. There's no doubt about that. I'm not knocking them at all. But because of the nature of this situation, it was not necessarily accurate information. And so it would have been beneficial to have something that started with law enforcement that was clear and simple and accurate. Okay. And so with that, I want you to take note that as Representative Landgraf mentioned, this shooting started at, I believe, 3:17, right around that time. And the shooter, they did not contain him, and they ended up having to shoot him as well. That happened an hour later, okay? So this guy is driving all over town pretty much. And people didn't know. In fact, 3:17 is when that was. 5:00 p.m. on Saturday, we had a mass. And people are coming to church at that 5:00 hour that were not even aware that there was a shooting taking place. And that's nearly 2 hours later, and they still didn't even know. And so with that, I thank you for your time, and I will let the family tell, one of the families tell their story, because as someone who watched people come into church that next day and then someone who preached at the funeral of a 15-year-old. We don't want to see this happen again. We want to do everything we can to make sure that that we use the tools that we have to allow the light, the good, to shine in the midst of the darkness, that something good can come out of this. And so with that, I ask for your support of this bill and to do whatever y'all need to do to make it work. But don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. But please work together and see how this bill can come about.
Very good wisdom from your father.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions or support for the father here? I won't butcher up your name anymore.
Nah, you're good. Just Father Tim keeps it. That's a little easier.
Okay, Father. Thank you so much.
Just
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. Thank y'all for all y'all do.
Thank
God bless
you.
y'all.
The chair recognizes Juan Hernandez and members as Mr. Hernandez is making his way up here. We're going to thank him for in advance for stating his name and who he's representing.
Yes, sir. My
and
name
his
is
position on the bill.
Yes, sir. My name is Juan Hernandez. I'm representing myself. I am for the bill. The father of Layla Hernandez is my brother. His name is Juan A. Hernandez also. So just for the record, my name is Juan J. Hernandez. And I'm sorry. I'm just a little shooken up. But August 31st was a day that, it impacted our lives. My family and the whole community of Odessa. We had just gone through one in El Paso, August the 3rd, and my wife and I were coming back from Arizona, and had no clue what was going on in El Paso that day. Because of course there was nothing, there was no alert, no nothing. And we heard about it through friends, family, Facebook. Seemed like some of it was fake news. Some of it was accurate news. We had no clue. So when it hit us in August 31st in Odessa, knowing that the very first victim that was shot that day was a state trooper, to me that if this would have been in place already, maybe they would have activated that alert right then and there, and maybe lives would have been saved. My daughter or my niece would probably still be here today. Like I said, I'm not going to tell more of the story. I'm going to keep it short, but I'd appreciate it if you guys, looked into this and helped us with it. I'm going to let my sister-in-law tell the story. I think she's the one that's, her right is to be up here. So,
Okay.
thank you guys.
Thank you. Correctional Officer Hernandez,
Yes, sir.
I want to thank you for your service to the state of Texas. And I want to thank you for supporting the family and supporting this. And I think we're going to find a way to get this thing moving, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Chair recognizes Joanna Leyva.
Hi, my name is Joanna Leyva. I'm representing myself and, of course, my daughter, Layla Hernandez. I'm for the bill. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that day and why I'm for this bill. August 31st is Labor Day weekend, family weekend. People travel. We woke up that morning, my family, my two sons, Nathan and Jathan Hernandez, and Layla. My oldest went to work, and he wanted to go see some trucks at the agency because he had graduated in May. So that was a gift for us, go look for a truck and purchase him one. He had told me he wanted to go out that day and look at the vehicles to see if we were able to, qualify and get him a truck. My son left to work. Me and Layla, my little one Jathan, and my husband Rodolfo Trejo left to go eat breakfast. At that time, my son texts me and lets me know, "Hey, Mom, I'm out. I'm out of work." He's all, "Do you think we could go look at the trucks?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're in town. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. I'll wait for you here in town. Leave the truck at Walmart, the one he had. I go and we'll pick you up and we'll go into town." He's like, "Okay." As soon as he parked at Walmart, we picked him up and headed towards 42nd Street. At that time, that was the time when everything was going on with Seth Thader, the shooter. He was having problems over there at his work. He was already, I think the cops were already being called. We didn't know anything, because he was being violently at his work. After that, we stopped at a tire place, and Layla's uncle called and said, "Hey, let's get together on Sunday. Let's go to Water World over there in San Antonio, Splash Town, or Splash World. I don't know what the name is." I go, "Okay, let me talk to the kids and we'll make arrangements to leave Sunday morning." So I talked to Layla and Jathan. I go, "Would y'all like to go, for Labor Day weekend?" And I told Nathan, "And if you don't find anything that day, let's go ahead and look at the trucks over there at San Antonio for Labor Day. Maybe they have specials or anything." And he's like, "Okay." So we were heading to Chevrolet first, American Chevrolet. I passed the street, which you take a turn on a Parkway, and GMC was just straight. So as we head there, I told him, "You know what, let's stop here at GMC first, and then we'll go to American Chevrolet to go look at the trucks over there." We got off the car, everybody carrying their phone. As we were walking, Nathan was looking at the trucks, and he stayed there with this truck that caught his eye. The guy from the agency came to him, and he kept asking questions because he liked that truck. So me, Layla, and Jathan, and my husband Rodolfo were walking. We left walking, and we left Nathan there talking to him, to the salesperson. And we were looking. We didn't like anything, so I told my husband Rodolfo, "You know what? Let's go ahead and go." I go, "They're too expensive." So we started walking back towards Nathan, and we were right there on 42nd Street. People were passing. Nothing. We couldn't hear no sirens. Nothing. We didn't know nothing. Everything was very silent. Usual Odessa. When we got to him, I told him, "Let's go. We'll go look at him at San Antonio." And he's like, "No, Mom. The salesperson's already gonna go get the keys." He's like, "Can I wait so I could test drive it?" I told him, "Okay, that's fine." So we started walking towards the office. The office is toward the back. We started working towards the office and looking at the vehicles. As we were in front of the office, there were more vehicles lined up there. I took a right. Rudy and Layla, Nathan took a left. I was looking at the very end of the vehicle when I heard a gunshot, thinking there were fireworks. That first shot, I stood still because I was looking inside a vehicle. My husband said that he was at the far end right, looking at the truck, and he had heard this gold tan car coming towards him. Usual people were driving by, looking at vehicles. He said that he looked up and saw that car because it was like like dragging something. He was very calm, very slow in between the car agency. He said that he looked down and started looking at the vehicle again. He said at that time, he saw the vehicle got very close to him, practically parked. He turned and looked, and he kind of waved. But when he did that, Seth Ader smiled at him and took out the gun and put it on his arm and shot his first shot towards my husband. My husband thought it was a paintball because when he shot that shot, he didn't feel nothing. He just felt like air. So he looked at him, and when he smiled again, Seth, at my husband, he threw another shot. That's when he turned himself around and knew there were gunshots. At that time, Nathan and Layla were a little bit more over to the left from Rudy. They saw him, and Nathan, my son Nathan, said he saw the car and heard the same sound, and he was about to tell Layla, look, Layla, I guess he's shopping for a car because, it sounds kind of broken. But he said, I wasn't able to tell him that when I saw him put the gun on his arm and shoot Rudy. He saw my reaction. My son's reaction was to turn around and start running. He saw when I started running, halfway there, Layla yelled his name, Nathan, my daughter. And Nathan realized Layla was in back of him. He turned around to pull her in front of him. So if any shots would shoot her, he would get shot instead of her. When he reached and pulled her, that shot that went through my daughter's right shoulder hit his arm and through him as well. They both fell to the floor. At that time, I was walking towards the truck because I was hearing more shots. So I realized there were gunshots. There were no fireworks. I turned around and I got my little boy, Jathan, and I dropped him to the floor. I pushed him, and I got on top of him, and I started yelling with all my strength, "Get down!" That was my reaction. I really didn't think those shots, because I wasn't able to see, but my reaction was to tell my kids, if there are shots, get down so nothing could hit you. Who would think you being there watching, looking for a car, that somebody would go drive by and start shooting at your family, especially you? You'll see it in the news. Oh, active shooter in El Paso. Oh, you don't think it's going to happen in your town. You don't think it's going to happen to you or your family. When I heard no more gunshots, I got up and I heard my daughter yelling, "Help me, Rudy," my husband. That's when I prayed to God when I was in the ground for no shots to hit my family. And when I heard her cry, I went around and I saw her on the floor, puddle of blood. My son Nathan was also on the floor, getting up. When I saw him get up, I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think he got shot or anything. My reaction was go inside and ask for help. I could not dial my phone. At that moment, you just don't think about. You just want somebody to help you. I run inside the agency and I tell them, "Can y'all help me? My daughter got shot. I need help. Call the ambulance. Please do something." Everybody was in shock. People started dialing their phones. The phone calls weren't going through, where there were so many people calling. I started dialing myself. Then I see my son running into the agency holding his arm, his right wrist. And I asked him, "Did you get shot?" He said yes. He took his hand off and all the blood was squirting out of his arm. I told him to take, I picked up his arms and took off his shirt and wrapped his hand around. And he started running back outside, and I started running with him too. I went, and there was already people there helping, a nurse, some other people that were there at the agency. They were around my daughter, trying to hold the blood, but the blood was where it went through one side and went out the other. They were putting pressure, but the blood was coming out through the other side. My husband, Rudy, was there the whole time. I felt helpless. I felt I felt helpless. I would hear, at that time, I was hearing ambulances pass by. I was hearing the cops. I was hearing sirens. I was hearing everything. And I still didn't know what was going on. I knew somebody had shot us, but who was it? Who would want to shoot our family? We didn't know there was an active shooter. And that had already passed around 20 minutes. And I didn't know. And I asked the people there, I go, do y'all know who that was? They're like, no, they just know this guy is just going around shooting. We think it's an active shooter. And this was probably, he had already shot maybe, I don't know, because there was a lot of, there was 25 people that got hurt that day. My reaction was to go to the 42nd Street and call the ambulance and stop them to tell them that my daughter needed help and my son. Nobody would stop. At that time, my husband runs to me because all the traffic was jammed up on 42nd Street where there were other people shot in front of Olive Garden, Twin Peaks, the little girl. And my husband asked me, do you want me to go get an ambulance? I said yes, because I don't think we're able to move Layla. She's bleeding too much, and she won't make it. You know, she has the help that she had there, or she had the aid until an ambulance would get there. So he went, and he went to Olive Garden. There were 2 ambulances there, and he asked them if they could go to the GNC agency because my daughter was hurt and his son. So the ambulance left, and when he got there, the ambulance was already there. When the ambulance appeared there, this happened like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, no, practically close to an hour. They moved us out of the way where my daughter was. I saw her take her last breath, and they prayed for her. And me, with the faith I had as a mother, I thought they had taken my daughter, right, to get helped, but my daughter was gone. My daughter was gone, and my son Nathan, they were able to put him in the ambulance, and he told them, no, don't take me, take my daughter, my sister. And no, they said that we have to take you first. So as soon as they put him in the ambulance and closed those doors, they told him, you need to be strong. Your sister didn't make it. He's all, you need help right now. And he was bleeding so much from his vein. And as soon as we got to the hospital, I still had faith because I really didn't know where my daughter was. I really thought they had taken her to the hospital that day. Us looking around for her, we couldn't find her. We called Lubbock, Texas. We called Midland Hospital. No, around 8:30 or 9, they told us that Layla didn't make it and that she was still at the agency because they had to investigate everything. My point here is that us as a family, we were looking at vehicles, not knowing what was going to happen to us that day. I believe if there was an alarm set up and we had that alert saying there was an active shooter, we would not be there while looking at the vehicles. We had already gotten in our cars, and you know what? We have to go. We don't know what's going on. This guy took his time all around Odessa, was everywhere, shooting whoever crossed his path, not caring who it was. When he shot my kids, he was heading to my kids because my husband got the first 2 bullets, and he didn't care if he was dead or not. He sped up to my kids and started shooting them. The bullets that they received, where the cars were at, all the windows were all broken. Tires were flat. I mean, he was aiming at the kids. He didn't care about my husband. When me and my little one were on the floor, hearing the shots, I turned to the side because Stripes is right there to the right. I saw all these people on the floor as well. And I was still thinking, ooh, who's shooting? Is somebody fighting? Is somebody shooting at each other? That's what I thought. And people were looking at us at the ground. They were looking at us. And I was thinking, why are they keep looking at us? What's going on? Then suddenly I feel some shots on the floor right next to me and my son. And that's when I knew those shots were for us. I cuddled my son as much as I could. And I would pray to God if any of those bullets would hit, for them to hit me and not my little one. As soon as he left, like I said, we didn't know who it was. I mean, we had no idea. And this guy still kept making his way and still kept on going for 30 more minutes, which took an hour, which they say it's an hour of terror that all the city of Odessa lived. I mean, like I said, it's been very, very hard in our family because my son is still going to therapy. We're still seeing a psychiatrist. We're going to family counseling. It has affected us in every way. And we don't sleep at nights. There's good days or bad days. And I believe that if we do set up an alarm system, not only will it help your family, it will help the community, the cities, anybody, Let's do it for our loved ones, for the people we care. Because it's hard. It's hard to lose my 15-year-old. I won't be able to see my daughter graduate. I won't be seeing my daughter play her basketball games. If I'd known my daughter would have lost her life that day, I would have hugged her more. If I would have known that would have happened to us that day, we would have stayed home. That's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanna. And I think we're going to get this bill moving today for you, okay?
Thank you.
And this committee loves you. This committee cares for you. Obviously, your House member cares for you. Members, any questions or comments for Joanna? Okay. Do you have anything else for us?
No.
Stand by. Chair recognizes Vice Chair Bowers. Sorry.
I just want to say, as a mother, our hearts go out to you and your family. And for every time you have to recount that story again, I can't even imagine. And I want you to know that our prayers are with you as well.
Thank you very much. It is hard. It's hard to relive that day. It's hard to see that little face on the ground, being so helpless, having someone so heartless do so much damage. You always grow up thinking your kids will bury you. No mother or father wants to bury their child. You want to see them grow and succeed. My daughter wanted to be a lawyer. She was aiming for that. She was such a loving, caring little girl. And she cared so much about people. Okay. And I believe she would be very happy if this alarm would be set up for everyone. And I'm talking about everyone that lost someone that day. My son that got also hurt. My little one that's still going through a lot. That's all so much. But we're ready.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, we do have one resource witness, and we're going to go ahead and ask her to come up. And while Amy Hawk is coming up, because I have at least one question for her. As she is coming up, I'm going to announce if there's anyone else that wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 103, you need to register, and you can come down here to one of the assistant clerks to register if you haven't registered already. At this time, the chair recognizes Amy Hawk. She's with the DPS. And could you go ahead and state your name, who you're representing, and you're on the bill, right?
Yes, sir. My name is Amy Hauk. I am the Assistant Chief of the Texas and Department of Public Safety's Intelligence and Counterterrorism Division.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to, because a few of us, all of us have been looking at the fiscal note, and there's some changes that have been made in the sub. Do you have an idea what that would how that will affect the fiscal note?
I don't have specifics on the changes for the subnote, no, sir. I can speak generally about my understanding of the alert process and what our goal was with the fiscal note.
Okay. So, well, with the goal with the fiscal note, go ahead and explain that.
So, generally, currently, the existing statewide alert program that we have in place, we have 6-way statewide alerts, doesn't allow for our current processing, doesn't allow for us to issue alerts within a specific geographic radius as a requirement of this bill is. Also, in order for, and we understand the intent of this bill, in order for the alert to be effective, we understand that it must be timely. And so our current alert process takes, on average, 30 minutes to an hour to get an alert issued. And really the process begins with a local law enforcement agency making a request to DPS for the issuance of an alert. And then, we receive that alert, and then we verify that the information that local agency has provided meets the current alert criteria as defined. And then depending on which type of alert is being requested, there are some follow-on processes that we must go through. When we discuss the wireless activation or the wireless broadcasting, the current federal requirements allow only 2 wireless alerts to be issued for amber and for blue alerts. So the geographic radius really is most beneficial when a wireless alert is being issued, and currently the federal requirements only allow us to do that for a blue and for an amber alert. If a statewide alert system that was operated by DPS were in effect, that would allow us to issue then geographic-based alerts without having to go through the federal IPAWS system and without having to go through TDEM to shorten that time span that it takes to get from when a local law enforcement agency calls us to make the request as to when an alert can be issued and people receive those alerts on their phone. So really the goal of the fiscal note was to decrease the amount of time that it would take to push out an alert so that the most number, while the event is transpiring, those that could be affected would be notified.
Okay. And do we have an idea why? I saw some local government impact. Some local governments were reporting some fiscal impact. Why would they be reporting any impact?
So one of the, as I've mentioned, the local law enforcement agencies are responsible for submitting the requests to DPS. So I would imagine, and I can't speak specifically to those fiscal impacts, but training would be a requirement. The ability for staff and personnel to very quickly process that information and get it to the department and verify that all the criteria were met with enough time, to spare so that the alert can be issued.
Okay. Members, any questions for the resource? Chair recognizes Representative Schaefer.
Thank you. The bill calls for a 50-mile radius. Is that something that should be put in statute, or should that be put in rule? Because, in my military background, human beings if we alert them too often, they get numb to alerts. And so I worry about putting a mile radius in statute that's harder to change. Could we put that in rule so that y'all could maybe tailor it so that if a local sheriff's office said, we need this alert, but we only need it for our county, and that's a smaller, I'm trying to think through some fact patterns where a more tight alert system would be more appropriate, and I worry about putting the 50-mile number in statute rather than in rule, where we have a little more flexibility. Does that make sense, Mr. Chairman?
Okay. I think the author is willing to work with us on that. And as another witness told us, we need to work through that, obviously, but, we don't want the perfect to blow up the good and the practical. So, yes, sir. Okay, a good point. Anything else for the resource? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, is there anyone else that wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 103? The chair recognizes Chairman Landgraf to close on House Bill 103.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling the resource to give me a little bit of time to compose myself. For two reasons now, I agree that in a new version, or however we choose to go about that, I think we have two good reasons to keep the 50-mile radius out of the text of the bill, out of statute. I think there might be a more efficient way to do that. I think that could also allow us to conform to an existing system, which might end up saving the state more money too, because we're not completely reinventing something else. But I think that I think it's a great suggestion. And while you were in another hearing, Representative Tinnerholt had addressed another aspect of the same concern. So I think we have really two really good reasons, and I appreciate y'all bringing that up. Sorry, I'll stick with the nuts and bolts here for a moment. I believe that this committee heard some testimony earlier in the session regarding the WIA, the federal WIA system, the emergency alerts that. So there, just to be clear, there are some systems in place now that counties and municipalities can use, but it goes back to a proverbial, patchwork situation where getting them activated, having training. It hasn't seemed to work very well. There hasn't been an active shooter situation yet in Texas that's been able to effectively utilize that. And of course, it works outside of DPS. But I think the goal here is that local law enforcement would, once there's a situation that's communicated directly to DPS, and then DPS would have the authorization to flip the switch basically on this system. And again, I think we have a better way to move forward about how to address that in a geographic sense. Anyway, I think HB 103 or the committee sub there too would ensure that every Texan would be able to benefit from this system regardless of county or municipality. But and I think, and again, I think that y'all have a great idea for how we can make that improvement. I'll begin work on that immediately. You heard some powerful testimony. As you might imagine, this is not the first time I've heard that story, but it still impacts me the way it did the first time that I heard it. And I mentioned that was a dark day for Odessa and for Midland and for our region in the Permian Basin. And it's easy to feel helpless in a situation like that, especially with such random acts of violence. I mean, nobody was selected to be a victim. It was just a brutal example of wanton violence. And that can make a community and a family feel helpless, but these are not helpless people. They're very powerful people because they're using this moment to show that we all have a choice to help instead of hate, to love instead of hate, to help instead of harm. And I just want to thank Mrs. Leyva, the Hernandez family, for having the courage to come forward and to be such strong advocates for Layla's memory. And it took her several months to be able to talk about this with anybody outside of her family. But she said she would do anything for that baby girl. Okay. And she's doing it. And so I appreciate you taking time to hear her story. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any questions for our colleague here? And just to make sure that I do the housekeeping right, I want to recognize Representative Helfner has returned with us, and he is present. Okay, no questions for Chairman Landgraf. The committee substitute is withdrawn, and if there is no objection to the adoption of the committee substitute, the bill would be left. Okay, so members, let me just preface. We've had the family come travel a very long period of time. I'm confident, working with Representative Schaefer and Tenderholt primarily, we can get some of this other stuff. I'm confident that we can work through the fiscal note scenario. And so I don't, as the father told us, we shouldn't allow the perfect to get in the way of the good. So it's my intention, if there's no strong objections, to go ahead and get this bill moving and voted out. We had a good discussion about communications last week. Okay, so the committee substitute is withdrawn. Okay, and if there's no objection to the adoption of the committee substitute, the chair hears none, and the substitute is adopted. Okay. Chair White moves that HB 103 as substituted be reported favorably to the full House, with the recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chairman White,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bowers,
Aye.
Goodwin,
Aye.
Harless,
Aye.
Hefner,
Aye.
Morales,
Aye.
Patterson,
Aye.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Tenderholt.
Aye.
9 ayes, 0 nays.
There being 9 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails. Okay. Thank you very much, members, for helping the family out on that.
House Bill 461 and recognizes Representative Shaheen to explain his bill.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bowers, members of the committee. HB 461 seeks to instruct law enforcement to execute as soon as possible a warrant that is directed to them for the return of a parolee who is being monitored under what's called the Super Intensive Supervision Program, or SISUP. Currently in Texas, there exist different tiers of parole supervision, and SISUP, again, Super Intensive Supervision, is the highest tier reserved for the most heinous acts, including murder, kidnapping, indecency with a child, sexual assault, aggravated assault. There is a gap that exists, however. Sometimes a warrant for a parole violation will be issued, but won't be responded to quickly by law enforcement, which may place a victim at risk. HB 461 seeks to prioritize SISUP warrants to be served as soon as possible above others. With that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions and reserve the right to close.
Okay, thank you. We'll have it.